This is Long Shots, VSiN's premier golf betting podcast. Here's Matt Brown, Wes Reynolds, and Kelly Bidlin.
It is Long Shots here on VSiN DraftKings Network. Matt Brown, Wes Reynolds, Kelly Bidlin doing his thing elsewhere this week, Wes, but he will be here in spirit, no doubt. And we'll be taking a look at as we enter the playoff run here and who's going to take down the playoffs in golf. I know you can play all these events all season long, Wes, and then you just run hot for 3 tournaments and then you can take it all down.
Well, now it's so interesting because obviously FedEx pays a lot for the inventory, and in February you're watching a PGA Tour event. Let's get you a FedEx Cup playoff update. It's like, who cares? Right. Well, now you care because it's here.
Exactly. So we will certainly run through our picks, the different stats that matter to us, and give you our modeling stuff as well. But listen, let's go ahead and talk about some of the news this week real quick, Wes. And that is, of course, the schedule for next year gets released. They are talking about, hey, there are going to be some changes in the way this thing looks. And we knew there was going to be some changes, and we'd heard some rumors heading into the official release. And then we get the 3 of the now signature events, no longer designated events. Only 3 of them are going to feature a cut. The rest of them are just going to be events in which if you show up, you're getting paid. You're going to play 4 rounds no matter what. What did you think of this when it kind of came out? How do you think? And honestly, from a betting perspective, there are implications, right? Because that means there are now going to be 5 different tournaments in which a whole market for us is taken away because the make-miss-cut market is not even going to be available for those tournaments.
Right, and you did get a couple switches. Now the Pebble Beach, most notably, is now a signature event, so less in the field, less time, obviously, without all the Pro-Am stuff. So you kind of could see that this was coming and that this was the direction they were heading to based on how they're doing these new tiers and whatnot. Farmers Insurance still stays in that Saturday prime time finish, so that goes Wednesday through Saturday. So, not a lot of surprises here. Kind of a tough beat, I guess, for the RBC Canadian Open, who had like the perfect spot in the schedule, and now they don't get to be the week before the U.S. Open, so you wonder if that's going to be a skippable event with the Memorial being the week before the U.S. Open. A couple new events in terms of the alternate events, and then Houston gets moved up into the spring. That's on the fall series for the last year, this calendar year. So Olympics also does play a part, so they had to do a little finagling and moving around because that, I believe, is at the end of July over there at Le Golf National in Paris. So no surprise with all these schedules. And look, that's why this matters this week, because you want to play in those events. That's why you want to get in this top 50. So that's why this is a bigger event than you would ordinarily think.
One of the things they did say, and look, this was all kind of a work in progress. So these signature events are not going to be mandatory like they technically were this year. So you don't have to show up to them. However, the prize pools are going to be significantly bigger. So you would think that they would still attract the majority of the bigger stars that are out there. The Genesis, the Arnold Palmer, and the Memorial are the only 3 that will actually feature a cut. 80-man fields with 36-hole cuts for the top 50 and ties. If we tune in next year and you watch the Century, the Pebble Beach, the RBC Heritage, the Wells Fargo, the Travelers, or the FedEx Cup playoffs, you will see that those have no cut whatsoever. And Wes, from a betting standpoint, I think from not only with it eliminating a market for us to bet, but 2, it's going to be interesting for us to try to figure out how far back some of these superstars can come back from, right? Where they normally would have been cut from an event, but let's say they would have been cut on the number and they're only 6 strokes off the lead. Like, now this really is going to change some of the stuff that we do, and I don't know if we'll even know exactly how to tackle it throughout the course of next year.
Well, I'm interested in terms of what it's going to do to, like, placement markets.
Yeah.
And we're kind of going to see a little glimpse of it and get a hint of it this week with only 70 players in the field in a no-cut event, because it's a lot different, betting those top 30s and top 40s in 150-player fields than it is in 70 and 80-player fields. So I'm interested to see. I have not done any placement market stuff yet. I got to look at that tonight and get some of that out Wednesday morning, but might be fewer and far between than it is for a usual normal event.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think, from like you mentioned, like, not only do we lose a market, I don't know how many of those. I mean, we might get top 20s maybe in those, but probably the 30s and 40s probably aren't going to be available for those tournaments. So we are going to lose a lot of different betting markets.
And that's kind of where I live in the placement markets, top 20, 30, and 40, some rare top 10s, but Now you're going to have to be thinking, do I want to do more top 10s and more top 5s and these type of things?
So, Wes, let's pour a little bit out for my Russell Henley outright ticket this past week. We'll pour some out. I mean, listen, the only fortunate thing that did happen was, and I say fortunate for me as a bettor, not necessarily for the guy I'm talking about, but Billy Horschel did fall off early, which allowed me to just kind of get into a head-to-head basically with Glover and Henley. So, come out with a steak dinner as opposed to a nice outright hit. But I don't really – I'm curious as to what you think here. I don't really hold a lot against Russell Henley for that because it's like golf's hard anyway.
Yeah.
And you're rolling, and then the weather delay comes in, and then now anything that you kind of had going on, you have to stop, you have to restart. Now the course conditions have changed as well because it took on a bunch of rain and all of that. And so, again, golf's hard anyway, and then now you got to stop in the middle of a round, go in the clubhouse, sit and wait, go back out, warm up again, and then go out to a course that has different conditions than you were playing on for the first 15 holes of the deal. Like, some people were calling it a choke job. I'm kind of like, I don't know if it's a choke job.
Maybe more of a victim of circumstance.
Yeah.
I guess. And look, credit to Lucas Glover. He played terrific. Was great off the tee. Was great on approach. And Lucas Glover, even though he missed that cut at the 3M, you could kind of see it coming that he was going to be in contention real soon for a win again because I think he had 3 straight top sixes. So Lucas Glover, 20 under par. Benny On, by the way, finishes tied for second. Another good event for him. Webb Simpson, haven't seen him on the leaderboard in a while. He gets into the top 5. For my outrights, I had 3 guys there, T7, Todd, Svensson, and Poston. Ended up making a little small change on this tournament just because of the placement markets and the matchups. But none of my guys that were kind of in contention going into the weekend really ever got going where you could see, okay, this is going to be a 3 or 4 guy tournament.
Yeah, it's one of those things where Lucas Glover is a guy that I think, from a modeling standpoint for you and I and Kelly even as well, a guy that the stuff that we put emphasis on, he always tends to kind of pop a little bit higher than you would expect because he is so good in certain areas.
The fairways gained and the good drives gained and those things.
Yeah, all those different things like that. But forever, his putter had failed him, and he was unable to actually get things done. And now you see all these guys making these putter changes. And, I mean, listen, it could be mental, right? I mean, golf could be – there's a lot of stuff that goes on in golf that could be mental as well. But you see all these guys making these putter changes, and then their putting is starting to kind of pick up and come around a little bit. And we said it about a million different guys, most notably Scotty Scheffler. We were like, listen, if this guy could just putt it to a 0, like he's going to start winning some tournaments. Well, we kind of used to say that about Lucas Glover as well. We're kind of, man, if he could just make a couple more putts, like with the other stuff that this guy does well, he's probably going to win some tournaments. And, again, this was not a star-studded field, and that's fine and everything like that. But he goes out, putts pretty well, wins a tournament. And, I think that we'll probably see Lucas Glover pop and win some of these maybe less star-studded fields whenever he can. So. Yeah, roll him in.
We forget that the guy was a major champion. He didn't win the U.S. Open at Bethpage Black all those years ago. I didn't know he was 43. It seemed like he was a young guy, but I think this was his 5th PGA Tour win, so obviously gets himself into the top 70 this week. Justin Thomas does not, even though he was live, he was game, a very game effort from Justin Thomas, and you could tell, too, what it meant to him. To not only get into this, to obviously get into to perhaps play those elevated events, designated events, I should say, next year, but also Ryder Cup team. And a lot of these guys, look, they want to win the FedEx Cup, and you want to win every time you tee it up. But for some of these guys that are kind of borderline, Ryder Cup implications are huge these next 3 weeks to make that last impression.
So we look at these standings for the FedEx Cup, and as Wes alluded to, Justin Thomas, I won't call his a choke job either, but I think his was much more close to a choke job than what was going on with Russell Henley, because Justin Thomas makes the eagle and then gets inside, and he's like, oh, man, I'm here, because they had it posted. He knew.
Because Jim Nantz was the hello Memphis.
Yeah, they had it posted apparently at the tournament. You could see he knew he was in, and then comes out and then just misses badly on the next 3 holes and is unable to get it done. Of course, had the miracle chance at the chip in order to try to get in. But this poses a question that we've been talking about for a few different weeks here on Long Shots is, what are they going to do from a Ryder Cup perspective? Can you really and truly leave off one of not only just a guy that has had a bunch of success, but really one of the faces of U.S. golf, right? Yeah. I mean, everybody likes Justin Thomas.
And there's something to be said for team chemistry, too, as well, because we know he and Spieth have been a very good team, both at the Ryder Cup and the President's Cup. Ricky Fowler is, I think, even though he's not locked in, probably going to be on the team based on the quality of golf he is playing. And then they're all close buddies. So there's that when they say, the team room, he's a good team room guy. I think he definitely would be here. So I don't think Justin Thomas, as poorly as he's played sometimes this summer, I don't think that he's a lock not to make the team, I shall say, because it seemed like at the Open, okay, this guy's lost. Maybe there's not a point of no return here for him, but he's in the mix. Look, a lot of borderline guys. Tony Finau, I think, is another guy you would want to look at. Sam Burns. There's a lot of depth on the American side. Somebody's going to get left out.
Yeah, we take a look at those Ryder Cup odds right now. The USA is minus 190 over at DraftKings, plus 185 on Team Europe, and then the tie coming in at 12-1. Now, this is one of those things where had those guys been playing better, Wes, this number probably would have increased. It would be much bigger on USA because, again, if Justin Thomas is playing like Justin Thomas, if Tony Finau is playing like Tony Finau, if Sam Burns, who had maybe just a little bit more consistency, he still did win on tour this year. We should point out
and
for
in
that.
A match play event, by the way.
But we kind of see these odds not near as big as they were, a few months ago. And I wonder what you think about them. Do you think that Team Europe has kind of closed the gap on the U.S., or do you think these odds are actually favorable for U.S.?
I do think Europe's closed the gap a little bit because I think that they have that core, of McIlroy, Rahm, Tommy Fleetwood, Shane Lowry, Victor Hovland, Matt Fitzpatrick, Justin Rose, Shane Lowry. Like, that's that core eight. And then they're probably going to have rookies on the back end, maybe a Robert McIntyre or an Adrian Morong or one, if not both, of the Højgaard twins. So Team Europe, I think, still has a solid base of 8 players despite all the defections to Live Golf.
Just 70 guys going to tee it up this week, but we will run down that odds board, see if there's any value, and, of course, Wes will give us a full course preview as well when we come back here on VSiN DraftKings Network.
This is Long Shots, VSiN's premier golf betting podcast. Here's Matt Brown, Wes Reynolds, and Kelly Bidlin.
It's football season, and bettors know that this is when the money is made. Nobody knows football like VSiN, and now's the time to become a VSiN subscriber and get our comprehensive college and NFL guides. Only VSiN subscribers get all the tools to prep for the college and pro football season. Our experts provide profiles of every team with advanced stats and power ratings, plus best bets on season win totals, division finishes, and player awards. You can sign up today for $199. You'll get both of the guides and everything we do all the way through the Super Bowl. Or you can join for just $19 for the first month. That's kind of dipping a toe in there. See if you like everything to help up your betting game. You can do this over at VSiN.com/subscribe today. I suggest you do it and just go ahead and take the plunge. $199 to the end of the Super Bowl. You get another guide in there as well, all the other stuff we do on a weekly basis. So go ahead, get in there, make the plunge. Let's go ahead and do this. All right, looking at this board, Wes, this is, again, only 70 players. This is going to be no cut, so this does take a different look and a different approach here for us as we kind of look here. And Scotty Scheffler at the top at DraftKings is 6.5. Listen, Scotty Scheffler, we've talked about this, the historic ball striking season that he had and how terrible the putter has been. Had he been able to putt even just a little bit better, probably has 2 or 3 more wins somewhere along the way. He finds himself as a pretty, substantial favorite, all things considered. 9-1 is the next number we're looking at on Rory McIlroy and Jon Rahm. Those are your big 3, and then we take the jump all the way to 14 on Patrick Cantlay. When you take a look at those top 3 guys, I think it's rightful that they are in that tier above these next guys as well. You know me, I don't typically dabble in the super short shots in tournaments and stuff. I just not my style of betting. But what say you about those 3 guys at the top and the odds attached to their name?
I think Scotty, justifiable favorite. And when we talk about like models, he's always number 1 because look, he's number 1 not only on approach the last 36 rounds, but also strokes gained off the tee and strokes gained around the green. You don't see that very often. Maybe one is leading 2 of the 3 categories, but to lead all 3. So he's the rightful favorite here. If you look at previous form, though, I don't believe he has a top 10 in a few career appearances here. Now, that could obviously change. Rahm, top 7, I think 2 of the last 3 appearances he's had here. Rory's had a top 5 here, that back in 2019. So nobody I really wanted to bet in the outright market. I think probably for Scheffler, top 5 or a top 10 would probably be the way to go, because you just can't ignore those numbers. But this is a quality field. I think a lot of the quality, actually, from a price standpoint, kind of gets you in that mid-range when you get into the high 20s, 30s, even maybe the low 40s. I think that that's where actually most of my card came from this week.
Yeah, it is. It's super interesting because I look at this, and yes, there's a lot of win equity wrapped up in those 3 guys. There's no doubt about it. On any given tournament, when they tee it up, they could be the very best player by a long shot whenever they get going at it. But I think if we look at the rest of this field, and I'm curious more for a couple of these names that we're about to get to. And if you think that the number attached to their name is rightful, and that's Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele, you're sitting here at 14-1 and 18-1, and these are guys that we talk about win equity. Now, these are, listen, we love placement market bets on long shots. We place a ton of these things. This is how we kind of keep the bankroll at least steady between hitting some of these outrights. And Cantlay and Schauffele are darlings for those type of markets, but they don't win a lot, Wes.
Right.
And the win equity, I wonder, like, if I see a 14 next to Cantlay and an 18 next to Schauffele, and I'm kind of like, I'd rather play Hatton or, like Wyndham Clark, Ricky Fowler. Like, I almost think that the win equity for those guys is just as good as it is for Cantlay and Schauffele.
Yeah, I feel like they went a little bit with the OWGR. Cantlay, of course, 4, Schauffele 6, Victor Hovland, by the way, in between them at 5th. But, yeah, they don't have you would expect that, okay, these are the prices, so they're not surprising, but I would expect, based on what their true value should be, that they would be in the low 20s here. And you're looking at some of these guys that have either won this season, like Clark, like Fowler, like Day, or guys that have been, I think, a lot closer to wins, maybe certainly than Cantlay and Schauffele have been. Hatton, Tommy Fleetwood have certainly been right there for wins, at least a lot more recently than these guys have.
Each and every week, you can head over to VSiN.com. You can see all of the great words that are written by Wes Reynolds on all of these courses. But, hey, that's why you're tuning in. You want to know what this course looks like and some of these stuff that you will be dealing with. So what are we looking at over at the St. Jude?
Yeah, TPC Southwind in Memphis, Tennessee, built in 1988, designed by Ron Pritchard with some consult from Fuzzy Zoller and Hubert Green. Probably more difficult than your average TPC course. You look, most of these TPC courses are birdie fest. You certainly can go low here, but this is not a birdie fest. Par 70, 72-43. Zoysia grass fairways, which they do a lot, but just because of the heat in the summer in Memphis. It is usually very hot and humid this time of year, as it is in a lot of places in the country. Zoysia, kind of like the East Lake Golf Club at Atlanta, where the Tour Championship is going to be. Really narrow fairways, too. 25 yards wide on average. That is the second narrowest on the PGA Tour. Bermuda rough, 2.5 inches thick. So it doesn't seem like much, but Bermuda can be kind of tricky and unpredictable as well. Greens are champion Bermuda. 4,300 square feet, so third smallest greens on tour. Roll about 12 on the stimp meter, so they roll pretty true, too. The undulations are not on the greens. They're actually in the fairways here more than they are the greens. 11 water danger holes. By the way, TPC Southwind, we would think it would be TPC Sawgrass, but that's actually number 2. TPC Southwind, most water balls on tour the last 20 years. 6,166 to be exact. Most on any PGA Tour course in that stretch. So, look, because of the challenge, obviously, of the narrow fairways and the smaller greens, multitude of water hazards, ball striking stats are even more at a premium this week. Now, this might score a little bit better, though, this year, because even though it's been hot and humid, they've gotten a lot of rain down there in Memphis this summer. So you may see this play a little bit softer, because usually this is pretty dried out, firm and fast, so this could play a little bit softer. So I'm guessing you could see lower scoring maybe than you've seen, at least in the recent last few years.
One of the things I did was more look at course history as opposed to tournament history here. Again, the format has now changed. Wes, we don't have the live guys that are playing, so there's all of that factors in as well.
Yeah,
so,
by the way, let me interject really quickly. The guy in the field, in terms of who has won this event, the only defending champion in this field is Harris English, or the only former champion, I should say. That was back in 2013, because all these guys either didn't qualify for the playoffs, or they're injured, like the defending champ, Will Zalatoris, or they're on the Live Tour.
Yeah, so this is like, I just looked at course history as opposed to kind of tournament history here, because as you can see, if you're watching on VSiN and DraftKings Network, Will Zalatoris, of course, hurt. Abraham Answer, gone. You go back and you look, Justin Thomas didn't make it. Koepka over on Live. Dustin Johnson over on Live. Daniel Berger hurt. So, yes, I mean, this is like literally goes back a long, long way here of guys that have, actually won this tournament. And so I just did kind of course history, not really tournament history. So many things have changed, this format being different and all of that. So that's kind of how I went at it. And honestly, once I put all that in, I kind of started to back off a little bit from it too as well, because it seemed like it was kind of skewing the model super weird for me. And so I actually ended up in the final version of all of this. I actually didn't put in course history here at all. And I'm just kind of going to roll with guys that I think are more the fit as opposed to the history.
Yeah, if you're looking for maybe some correlated courses here, TPC Sawgrass, obviously, because of the largesse of water holes. East Lake, the Zoysia Fairways, where they played the Tour Championship in Atlanta in a couple weeks. Country Club of Jackson, I thought, because of the Bermuda, maybe a little bit of Innisbrook or PGA National. So those were the ones that you could kind of look at a little bit. Pritchard, by the way, this is the only design that he has on the PGA Tour, but he has worked on some Donald Ross, like Aronimink, so maybe a little carryover there if you really want to get knee deep in the weeds. I did not do that, though. I just it was kind of like a glance over, not something I really modeled per se.
We have producer extraordinaire Wyatt behind the glass today, and he gave us a weather report here for Memphis. And so if we were wondering, of course, this can all change, but we just want to let you know. Looks like the highs are kind of in the high 80s, low 90s for this, but we do have at least some sort of chance of rain just about every day. And then specifically in Thursday and Friday, and this is something that I'll try to put on the Twitter machine as we get a little bit closer as well with all of this. There might be some sort of weather split. There might be some sort of something we'd be looking at there. The winds could be gusting up over that 20 mile an hour mark, as high as 25 miles an hour. And Wes, that's one of those things, very hard to predict, and we know that the wind can kind of come and go with all of that, but maybe the closer we get, maybe someone will be able to kind of hone in and see if it's going to be worse in the morning or worse in the afternoon, whatever it might be, and then we can at least try to go in and adjust our cards accordingly because, listen, guys, weather definitely matters, right? Yeah. It is a huge, huge thing in golf betting.
Usually, this forecast is a lot different because usually it's just like pure heat and humidity down there in Memphis. And now you're getting a mixture of rain and even the wind, which I had not looked at as of yet, because I mentioned that this is going to play, I think, a little bit softer just because of the rain that they got in July down there.
So when we come back, we will go through the stats that matter to us. What did we end up plugging into the model this week? If you want to build your own model at home, maybe you can glean a little bit out of what we were going after for, the perfect golfer here for this week as we try to hit another outright on long shots. It's Wes and Matt coming back here on the other side.
This is Long Shots, VSiN's premier golf betting podcast. Here's Matt Brown, Wes Reynolds, and Kelly Bidlin.
Want to get in on the fantasy action, but you are sick of managing your roster, sick of the injuries to end your season? Well, Best Ball and DraftKings, you get the best of your team all season long. This year, Best Ball and DraftKings is bigger than ever with $10 million guaranteed prizes up for grabs. For a limited time, you can join DraftKings' largest Best Ball contest ever and get your first entry back in DraftKings dollars as soon as the draft is finished. Act now before this offer expires. Start playing Best Ball. Download the DraftKings app. Use Best Bets. Enter DraftKings Best Ball Millionaire Contest and snake draft your team for the season. Each week, you'll automatically rack up points from your top scorer. No ads, drop trades, or I should have played him instead. Teams with the most points at the end of the season have a shot to take home $1 million as the top prize. So what you waiting for? Head on over to the DraftKings app. Best Bets is that code if you have a gambling problem. 1-800-GAMBLER. One per customer. Opt-in required with $10 entry fee. Bonus issued in 10 DK dollars. Age and eligibility restrictions do apply. Void where prohibited. DraftKings.com/promotions for details. It was a very long way of saying this is what you do. You go in and you draft a whole bunch of players, and after you draft, it's over, and the guy that scores the highest at each position is automatically entered into your lineup, and that's it. That's all you have to do. That was a very long way of saying that. Yes. We just draft a lot of guys. Best guy gets inserted. Bam. That's how you do your fantasy team over on the Best Ball. A lot of fun. I would highly recommend it. Give it a go. So let's go into our modeling, and this is the disclaimer that we use every week here, but I do want to, for full transparency and stuff like that. We are not coders. We did not invent these models. We did not code these models ourselves. We are using some of these people that are much more smart at that stuff
we are not inventors. We are interpreters of data.
Exactly. So a few different sites that we use out there, credit where credit's due. Rick Rungood is out there. Fantasy National is out there. Data Golf is out there. They all have different ways of going about putting in information. Now, you do use your knowledge. You're weighting these things to what you feel is most important. You are including or excluding stats that maybe other people are using. So there is all of that stuff that goes into it. But again, the actual nuts and bolts of all of that is being done by someone else. So we do models each and every week, try to look at what names pop to the top. And this doesn't necessarily mean that we are a slave to exactly what pops out in these models. If that were the case, we'd just be betting Scotty Scheffler and John Rahm and Rory McIlroy every single week. But we're trying to see if something kind of catches our attention, maybe where a guy is showing up for recent form or long-term form or whatever. It doesn't necessarily match the odds that are attached to his name. And if that's the case, we'll dig in a little bit deeper and take a look at those players. So, Wes, whenever we were kind of looking here, what stats did you throw in? What was the stuff that you were emphasizing this week?
Well, look, I think the heaviest this week has probably got to be strokes gained approach, considering I think it was last year like about 45% of the total strokes gained came on approach, which is above the tour average. Will Zalatoris, who, by the way, won here last year, first in the field on approach. Justin Thomas won here in 2020. DJ in 2018. They were second on approach during their wins here in Memphis. So usually I run like top 15 to top 20. That is in my column that'll be up at VSiN.com later this afternoon. So, like, if you go like top Scheffler, Rahm, Glover, Hubbard, Smalley, Morikawa, Matsuyama, Henley, Schauffele, Fowler were the top 10 for the last 36 rounds. And by and large, I use like 24 and 36 rounds. You can go 12 if you want a little bit more recency, but I looked at approach heavy, also did some proximity for context, and that's 125 to 150, 150 to 175, 175 to 200. It's going to be a lot of short irons and maybe some middle irons in terms of your approaches to the greens here. I did use a little more off the tee, though, than I thought, because what you're seeing, there are 12 dogleg holes here, by the way, Matt, at TPC Southwind. These guys now, they can just cut the corners off the edges. So the distance has really gone up over the last couple of years, where it's 294 yards average driving distance. So I think you had to use a little strokes gained off the tee. And top five there, Scheffler, Cantlay, Hovland, McIlroy, Benny on were the top five over the last 36 rounds. But I also did combine with a little bit of accuracy, because with these narrow fairways I was talking about, 25 yards wide, like second narrowest on the PGA Tour, I think you had to look at a little good drives gain and also some fairways gain. So Lucas Glover, who we mentioned earlier, number one in good drives gain, number two in fairways gain. We'll see if he can go back-to-back. He is always up there in that mark. Also a little combo platter of strokes gained around the green and scrambling gain. Because you have some unpredictable Bermuda rough and some tight lies around these greens, it's tough to gain strokes around the green. I think it's like top 10 toughest on tour. So I used both of that. Also used one little scoring stat, the strokes gained par 4, 450 to 500. 8 of the 12 par 4s on this layout are 445 or longer. So I think you had to look at that. Top 5, by the way, there, McIlroy, Schauffele, Hatton, Fleetwood, and Wyndham Clark. Opportunities gained, that is not like birdie or better. Birdie or better is like when you actually convert the putt. Opportunities gain is setting up those inside 15-foot looks. So Matsuyama, Scheffler, Glover, Rahm, Smalley, top 5 for that one. Then I did a little bit of strokes gain putting, even though the field is kind of level, I think, with putting, because these run so pure and so true. But I still think if you're looking at the really good Bermuda putters, and those guys have been Taylor Montgomery, Bermuda Burns, of course, Sam Burns, Taylor Moore, Andrew Putnam, Thomas Dietrich, Tyrrell Hatton, Ben Griffin, Adam Schenk, your top 8 in that category. Then I did some strokes gained tee to green on Bermuda. Even though these are Zoysia fairways, this is pretty much a Bermuda course. So that's what I think that you wanted to look at this week. And then not really modeled it, like I said earlier, but just looking at some of the comparative courses like TPC Sawgrass, East Lake, et cetera.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same as you. I did emphasize a ton on approach this week. And it's one of those things where I want guys, and kind of hand in hand with that is that opportunities game, which I also did factor into the model this week. And I just want guys giving themselves a chance to go at it. You mentioned that the size of the greens here, not necessarily big by any stretch of the imagination. So listen, I want the guys that are also hitting these greens. And so I actually did add a little bit of greens and regulation percentage into mine, because I just, again, kind of basically compound all the stuff that I found important. I want these guys that are giving themselves opportunities, obviously need to be hitting the greens at a high percentage if that's going to be the case as well. From a driving standpoint, didn't really emphasize strictly just distance. Again, we always say that distance could be a tiebreaker for anybody, right? If we are kind of on the fence about someone, if someone is, basically neck and neck with someone else, maybe the tiebreaker for you could be distance. I put a tiny bit of total driving, but mainly more on the good drive stuff out there, good drive percentage to see what's going on. I did do strokes gain putting on Bermuda. I think that is going to be pretty important this week. We've seen with Bermuda specifically, and you mentioned Sam Burns, and shocker, I know it's going to blow everyone away that I do have a ticket on Sam Burns this week. But, we've seen some of these guys that are actually really good Bermuda putters, that it does carry over, and it is kind of one of those stats that's a little bit more sticky, right? I mean, like we look and we can really hone down. I mean, we can POA guys and different things, but the Bermuda stuff does seem to be pretty sticky, especially with some of these guys that are out there.
Yeah, no question about it. So I felt that was a little bit more of a tiebreaker thing if you're putting in your model, because guys that are shaky putters can putt well here because there's not a lot of bumps in the greens. There's not a lot of undulations. It's pretty simple on this design, but still you want to go with the guys that historically are very good, like you mentioned with Bermuda Burns, of course. There's a reason why he has that moniker, but yeah, that's basically what I looked at here in terms of the putting. I comboed the strokes gained around the green with the scrambling as well, because I do think because these greens are so small at 4,300 square feet, you're going to hit good shots that are going to miss the greens, and you're going to have some chips out of these tight lies. So you really want guys that can recover from those type of shots.
The buckets of the 150 to 175 and then 175 to 200, I did a little bit of emphasis on that as well to see if that was something. Again, some of the stuff that we put in, I don't put in at a super high percentage of the model. It's just so that I have it for reference, right? Like you were talking about, kind of more of a tiebreaker type situation. And certainly it's just an interesting type because you can sort the columns. So it's interesting to be able to go in and see who comes out on top there. So as, no surprise, we literally just said this a second ago. In my 36 round, in my 24 round, of course, whenever you're putting as much emphasis on approach as we are, it's going to be Scotty Scheffler. Scotty Scheffler at the top of both of my models. Wes, look, if in a perfect world, if Scotty Scheffler goes out and wins this thing by 3 strokes, I don't feel guilty for not betting it, right? Like I don't. It's like one of those things where I can live with not betting a plus 650. I can live with a guy that is at the top of every version of every model that I've run. It doesn't matter what site that I made a model on. It doesn't matter. Every algorithm spits him out at the top. But is he the best player in the field? Yes. Has he been the most consistent player in the field? Yes. Can you poke holes with the putter? You can do that as well. I just can't get there at 650. Maybe if this was a double-digit deal, like if we got lucky and Scotty Scheffler was at 10-1, that might be something that I could be, talk myself into in a short field like this, but I just can't get there at 650.
Now, let me pose a quick question to you. I don't think you or I have Scotty Scheffler on the FedEx St. Jude card this week. I've seen some very smart people that put also pieces out there that are in the space that are betting him at 7-1. Would you rather bet him at maybe 5-1 or a little bit less to win the FedEx Cup? Because you mentioned a site that we both use as well called Data Golf. They, on their projections, have him 37.1% to win the FedEx Cup.
Right.
There's value in that.
Right.
If you want to bet, 5-1 or plus 450. That might be the way I would approach Scotty rather than the outright.
Right. Because, and like you said, because the consistency is going to be there. Like, listen, whether he wins this tournament or not, he'll probably be in the top 5. Yeah. I mean, that's just what we've seen each and every single week. So I like that angle right there for sure. I told you who's at the top of the model, but was there anybody that showed up maybe as a value? We will get to our betting card and let you know who is getting some of our dollars this week as we head into the St. Jude FedEx.
This is Long Shots, VSiN's premier golf betting podcast. Here's Matt Brown, Wes Reynolds, and Kelly Bidlin.
Football is ready to kick off, and VSiN has everything you need to make this a successful season. Our college football betting guide features best bets from writers and on-air personalities, along with team previews for all 133 FBS teams. Our NFL betting guide will help tackle upcoming NFL season with in-depth profiles of every team, including advanced stats, proven betting systems, and proprietary betting trends, plus best bets on season win totals, futures, and props. Become a VSiN Pro subscriber today for as low as $19 and get our college football and NFL betting guides today. Sign up at VSiN.com/subscribe. So for $19, you get both of the football betting guides, and you get to try us out for a month, and then you'll come in and you'll do the whole thing for the rest of the football season. That's the way to go. Go ahead, get in there, and absolutely become a subscriber. So, Wes, let's talk about what the models spit out and then what ended up on the betting card. I mean, for me, like I said, Scotty Scheffler at the top of every single version of just about everything that I ran. If you put that much emphasis on approach, he is going to be at the top. I mean, he is, like we talked about this, historic, this is not hyperbole, historic ball striking numbers. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous all season long. That streak that we talked about a couple of weeks ago of top 12s was finally broken a couple of weeks ago. But, I mean, the guy had not finished outside of the top 12 basically all season long. And so the consistency and everything that was there was fantastic. You get for me also, Rahm right up there. No shocker when it comes to all this. Rory up there as well. We already mentioned I wasn't going to be betting those guys at the top of the board when it all comes down to it. So kind of the first name that really popped in my model that did make the card, and the reason I'm bringing him up because I know that both of us have him, is Colin Morikawa. He is fourth, I should say, in my 36-round model. He is fifth in the 24-round model. And if you go in, despite the fact that the wins haven't been there for Morikawa lately, Wes, it's a pretty good stat profile for him. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, we talk about it's hard to win golf tournaments, right? It's hard to win golf tournaments. And so if you look, Colin, I think, is right there, and that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to win this week, but I do like everything about him, specifically for all the stuff that we were talking about we put in our models.
Well, and look, last week, Lucas Glover broke a 2-year winless drought. Maybe it's Morikawa's week to do the same thing. Fifth year last year is gained in ball striking, all 3 appearances here. 6 on approach, 3rd for grid drives gained over the last 36 rounds. And this just would fit the profile of a type of course he would win on. A little bit over 7,200 yard, par 70, premium on ball striking. And that, I think, has come back, even though the wins haven't come. He kind of struggled really in the spring. But I think those irons have come back. And we know on the irons, nobody hits them better when they're hitting them right than Colin Morikawa. So, yeah, I did have him very high this week. You
take a look in those numbers that Wes is talking about. So let's start with like the waste management, right? And look, he was still gaining, but for Colin Morikawa, 1.6, 1.7, 0.14, 1.23. Those aren't the type of numbers we were used to seeing with Colin Morikawa. Now you were talking about things started to come around. Now 2.4, 3.2, 4.3, 4.49, 5.8. So those approach numbers that we had grown to love, and the reason we love betting Colin Morikawa on some of these courses where we emphasize it so heavily, seems to be coming around. The profile of the type of player that we like really just pointed me straight to Colin Morikawa.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I don't think he's in danger of not making Team USA for the Ryder Cup, but he's not a lock,
right,
by any stretch. I think more than likely he ends up on, but certainly he wants to get his game in some shape. I know he missed a cut at the Open, but T2 at the Rocket Mortgage, played, I think, a little bit better than his finish indicated at the U.S. Open at T14. So good form, not that far away.
Let's talk about Tommy Fleetwood next on your card here. A guy that it was kind of a borderline deal for me, and I think at the end of the day, it just came down to win equity. I know he was right there, could have got it done. We wouldn't be talking about this anymore when it comes to Tommy Fleetwood, but pretty juicy number for a guy who's played really, really well of late.
Yeah. What's the song? All I do is win. Well, all Tommy Fleetwood does is do everything but win. If you look at the form. The runner-up at Canada, where I, of course, had him. He lost in the playoff to Nick Taylor with that 70-some-foot eagle. 5th at the U.S. Open, 6th at the Scottish, 10th at the Open, and really probably deserved a better finish because he was up there in the final pairing on the weekend. But good form for the summer. Still, of course, that win stateside eludes him. He has won many times around the world, has not done it on the PGA Tour. So perhaps this could be a week for Tommy Fleetwood.
So let's get into another guy that we share here in Sam Burns. And now this is a guy that is not going to be popping really in the models unless you really do a super short term. And now a lot of the stuff we like about Sam Burns has kind of come back over the last few weeks. But if you look in more of that 36 round type stuff, you're probably not going to see him popping super high. That said, we are not slave to the models. We're not slaves to these things. And there are certain types of skill sets that he possesses that we know when it goes right. As we talk about, he won this year. I know it seems weird because he hasn't been the guy just kind of at the top of the leaderboards week in, week out. But when we talk about win equity, when Sam Burns is hitting the irons and putting, he's going to be at the top. Like, he might not win the tournament. He's going to be way up there. And we like what he brings to the table this week. Both of us have
just got to be a little bit less erratic off the tee, and that's always your concern with Sam Burns. You're never concerned with him on the greens because they call him Bermuda Burns for a reason. But yeah, I do like him. I think he's coming around. He's a guy that, despite the fact that he beat Cameron Young and he beat Scotty Scheffler en route to that title at the match play, not a lock to necessarily make this team. And look, I think wants to go ahead and put that all to bed here. All 5 of his PGA Tour victories, by the way, have come in the South. 4 of the 5 on Bermuda greens. Runner-up here 2 years ago. Remember, he was in that playoff that eventually Abraham Answer won in 2021. So this just seems to be a very good course for him. If he just keeps it in the fairway, I think he's going to shoot some low numbers. Yeah,
I do too. I mean, this is a guy that's going to make some bombs this week on the greens, and as long as he's not spraying it, like you said, he's going to be up there, at least going after it. And with the number that we get attached to him, we can at least put ourselves in a situation to make some money. I think what you're going to say here is a buy low spot, because this is a guy that has been one of the most consistent players on tour the last 3 seasons. He got a little bit off track this season, but we know that, maybe that form was coming back around, showed pretty well here the last couple of weeks, and that's Tony Finau.
Yeah, 19th, by the way, in the USA Ryder Cup points. So unless he wins, he is not going to qualify on points, because only the top 6 get that distinction. But, seemed to get the hang of the course here last year. Best ever finish here was a tie for 5th. And then posted his first top 10 in 3 months just a couple weeks ago in his defense of his title at the 3M Open. So I think maybe peaking at the right time. Certainly not going to stand out on the model, because you have seen some erratic form, even though he did win earlier this year in a downfield at the Mexico Open.
It's one of those things where it's like we now get to the end of the season here, Wes, and we forget like the stuff at the beginning. We're like, by the way, those guys, that guy won.
Season,
it's like that guy won this year. It's like it just seems like it's been forever, and it's like no, it was this year. He actually won this year. Final guy on your outright card, and again, we might add a guy or two here along the way if that's the case. Check our Twitter machine. Check VSiN.com. Is Cam Young is coming in as your longest shot that you have on the tip?
Narrative Street walk this week, because if you remember Young's Wake Forest teammate, Will Zalatoris, when is he going to win? When is he going to win that first event? And he finally did it last year in Memphis, so we'll see if Cameron Young is walking in Memphis, like Mark Cohn saying. Missed the cut at the 3M 2 weeks ago, but the ball striking, I think, has really gotten back. T6 at the Deer, T8 at the Open. In fact, he gained 16 strokes ball striking at Royal Liverpool, but I think really never figured out those slow greens over there. Just was a mess with the putter. I think these greens will be more to his liking. So I'm going to buy a Narrative Street play here on Cameron Young, a little bit north of 40-1.
So we share Morikawa, we share Burns. The other guy on my card, and listen, I don't like the number attached, but I think the number's probably pretty appropriate in the 70-person field with the way that he's been playing, and that's Tyrrell Hatton. And Tyrrell Hatton,
I considered him as well.
Yeah, he popped in the models, and you kind of go in and you dig a little bit further, and I know I preach win equity, and you're going to say, Matt, what are you talking about? This guy doesn't win. But you do go back to the waste management. And since the waste management, on his resume this year, he's got a T6, a T4, an outright 2, a T3, a T5, another T3, a T6. This is a guy that's been knocking on the door, Wes, over and over and over again. Hasn't quite gotten across the finish line. But, again, in this type of field, this type of course, I had to put Tyrrell Hatton on the card this week.
And I think he performs better. And I've had him a couple times on the DP World Tour, and then we won in Orlando a couple years ago. He plays better, I think, in tougher conditions and when the scoring's not like 25 under par.
Ricky Fowler on the card for me this week. These last 2 were basically model plays, Ricky Fowler and Wyndham Clark. I know I've bet Wyndham Clark 2 different times, was fortunate to be on him for both of his wins this year. And I know winning 3 times is hard. Winning golf tournaments is hard. I understand. It doesn't mean that it can't be done. It doesn't mean that Wyndham Clark can't win again this year. But when, again, you look at these raw numbers on him, and he is, Wes, like he's right up there with the elites of the elites for what he's done so far this year. Now, the pedigree, I get it, not there comparatively to these other guys. guys, but this season what he has done is he's in the same breath with these guys.
Yeah, it's like maybe we just got to recognize, hey, this guy's not a one-hit wonder. I mean, winning the Wells Fargo is impressive enough, and then backing it up with the U.S. Open. One of the best players on this American side coming up for the Ryder Cup later.
You can go over to VSiN.com. You can get that man's full written breakdown of all this, and you can get our full card over there as well. Wes does have some matchups, and of course, we'll be adding placement bets as well.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.